I'm Aaron from PhoneDog.com, and move over Android and iOS. There's a new competitor on the horizon. Windows Phone is really making some waves, and I'm here with two awesome Windows phones on T-Mobile, the Nokia Lumia 710 and the HTC Radar 4G. Now, the Lumia 710 is Nokia's first Windows Phone device to be available on a carrier in the United States. Then you have the Radar 4G over here, also available from T-Mobile with very similar specs. Now, both have 5-megapixel cameras, both have very similar displays, and both have Windows Phone 7.5, also known as Mango. So what do we do in Phone Dog Land when we're trying to decide between two awesome handsets? We dogfight them. That's what we do. It's the Lumia 710 versus the Radar 4G and a Phone Dog dogfight. But first, some love to Best Buy Mobile because they hook us up with phones just like this for use in our one-paw game. When you go into Best Buy Mobile to get either of these devices, you'll walk out without dealing with rebates. You'll get the after rebate price. You don't have to deal with paperwork or waiting 8 to 10 weeks for a rebate card, anything like that. At Best Buy Mobile, you'll walk out rebate free. Let's take a look at both of these. Lumia 710, Radar 4G. Which one's the best? We'll find out starting right now. If you're looking for an alternative to Android or iOS, Windows Phone is coming up, and it's coming up pretty quickly. You know, it's definitely going to enter in as a third competitor in the race, you know, the OS race, if you will, between Android and iOS. A big competitor here, and these are two devices that are available right now on T-Mobile. The Lumia 710, to give you a quick rundown of the specs, and I'm going to clear off the display. Sorry for my cold, by the way. This is the post-CES signals that all of us tech reviewers get when we come back from the busiest trade show of the year. So here's the Lumia 710, 1.4 gigahertz single-core Snapdragon processor. It's got a 3.7-inch display with Nokia's clear black technology, so you can see that the blacks are really black here. 5-megapixel camera with a flash in the back that shoots video at 720p, and then you do not get a front-facing camera on this. So much to the chagrin of a lot of people that either like to take a lot of front-facing pictures or want to use it for video calling, you don't get that, whereas you do over here on the Radar 4G. Now, it is a 4G capable device. It supports T-Mobile's HSPA Plus bands up to 14.4 megabits per second. So, you know, technically, there's kind of a hubbub going over as to whether this is actual 4G or not, but still you can reach theoretical peaks of 14.4 megabits per second. Now, whether you actually see that or not, you're probably never going to see a speed that fast, but you know, I have seen speeds between 3 and 5 megabits per second pretty regularly. But anyway, 5-megapixel camera, like I said, it's running Windows Phone 7.5. Now, interestingly enough, you'll notice down here at the bottom, you get 3 physical buttons instead of capacitive buttons, which have come on all the other Windows Phone handsets to date. You get back, you get home, and you get search, but you'll notice that it's actually a button bar here with 3 physical buttons as opposed to capacitive. But otherwise, the device looks pretty good. It's got a kind of a plastic feel to it. You know, in comparison to the Lumia 800, if you've had any hands-on time with that, or even the Lumia 900, which is coming to AT&T later in the year, and you know, is a much higher-end device, at least in terms of hardware. And that's kind of the interesting thing about Windows Phone is, you know, when you look at the specs really don't go up all that much between devices. I mean, you have like the Titan that has an 8-megapixel camera instead of a 5, but the specs are pretty similar. 1.5 gigahertz processor. It really, where it increases display size and overall build quality. That's kind of Windows Phone's thing right now. But you can see here, you know, kind of a cheaper build quality here, but still nice to see Nokia and Windows Phone finally in the United States. We were kind of wondering when that was going to happen, and we saw this one, and then of course the 900 is coming to AT&T soon, which is another Nokia Windows Phone device. So you can see volume rocker over here, camera shortcut button over on the right side, over on the left side, nothing, bottom, nothing. You've got Nokia 710 down here at the bottom. This comes in a couple of different colors, black and white, if I remember right, but 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. I kind of say a bunch of colors. Like, that's really only 2 colors, but you know, black and white, 3.5 millimeter headphone jack over here, power button up top, and it's got kind of a nice curved feel to it, as you can see from the sides, that makes it pretty easy to fit in your hand. Then you have the Radar 4G over here, 1 gigahertz Snapdragon processor with a 3.8-inch display. Now, both of these have 480 by 800 pixels, just to keep that in mind. 5-megapixel camera on the back with 720p HD video recording. It does have a front-facing camera, so video calling's your thing, or you want to do some front-facing pictures, you can with the Radar 4G. Now, an important note here with battery life, you got a 1,300 milliamp hour battery over here. So 1,300 milliamp hour battery on the Lumia. You've got a 1,520 milliamp hour battery over here on the Radar 4G, although it's a non-removable battery. When I pull this little battery, or this little cover off, it exposes a SIM card slot and exposes the micro SD card slot, and that's about it. That's all you get back here. And excuse me, no micro SD card slot, I'm sorry, just the SIM card slot, and you can see it automatically powers the device down when I power it off. So that's something to keep in mind there. Then over here, you got your typical battery door as well, you know, a typical plastic battery door where you can access that battery, so you can either, you know, get additional batteries if that's something that interests you, or at least you have the ability to remove it, which is a nice touch on the Lumia 710. But they're both definitely different in terms of build quality here. You got a nice metal build over here on the Radar 4G in typical HTC fashion. It looks a lot like the Flyer, if you remember that tablet in 2011. And I hate to say it that way, but there have been so many tablets that have come out that I have to define it that way. But the micro USB charging port over here on the left side, you've got capacitive buttons down here at the bottom, and then a camera shortcut button and a volume rocker on the right spine. Up top, your 3.5mm headphone jack and your power button, and then it's powering up right now. Now, out of the box, you get some T-Mobile applications on both of these devices. You get over here, you get some nice little goodies that come from Nokia. ESPN comes out of the box on the Lumia 710, along with the typical Microsoft stuff like Xbox Live. But what you're really seeing here, in addition to Netflix and of course T-Mobile's My Account, you see Nokia Drive, which is a nice touch, and you can download Nokia Maps through the Windows Marketplace if that's something that interests you, which is a nice touch. But then over here, just Nokia Drive out of the box, and then you get of course Telenav GPS, T-Mobile TV, TuneIn Radio, Nokia's We Care application as well. Whereas over here you get, and I did not mean to go into that. Let's go back and take a look. Typical Microsoft stuff, like I said, Xbox Live. And then you get T-Mobile's My Account and Netflix pre-installed on this one as well. And then you get Telenav GPS and T-Mobile TV. Now, what you'll notice from HTC, you do get HTC Hub and HTC Watch. And the reason why, if you remember Sense 3.0 or Sense 3.5, which you see on all of the HTC Android phones, you notice that Microsoft's pretty strict as to what they allow in terms of customization. So Microsoft was like, you can't put a skin on this like you did with Windows Mobile. So there's no Sense skin per se. But what you can do is come in here and take a look at the weather with HTC Watch and HTC Hub. Now, HTC Hub is probably the closest thing you're going to get to Windows Phone, or the closest thing you're going to get rather to Sense on Windows Phone rather, but you can really see the elements here that look a lot like Sense. So if you're coming from an Android phone, an HTC Android phone at that, and you're really missing Sense, you can always pop in here, have a look at HTC Hub, check the weather, and kind of get a nice little a feel of the past, if you will. 3.8-inch display over here, so 0.1-inch difference between these two devices, and then, like I said, a front-facing camera. So a little bit of a hardware difference there. Now let's take a look on both of these devices at the messaging capabilities. Now there's only one keyboard that comes pre-installed on both, and that is the typical Windows Phone keyboard. And we'll come in here, and not only from the messaging interface on both of these, you can, if you're set up on chat, you can scroll right over to online and see who's available. But let's go in here and take a look at the keyboard. Now I really like Microsoft's keyboard. They've done a really good job with it, and I'll show you in just a second how easy it is to use. So we'll come in here on both. And you can really tell, when holding up black to black here, you can really see Nokia's, and the camera may not do it justice, but you can really see Nokia's clear black technology at work here. It is definitely a more solid black over on the Lumia 710. So if colors are really important to you, I'd give the Lumia 710 a slight edge there as opposed to the Radar 4G. So let's say the Quick Brown Fox is happy to be back from Vegas. Quick Brown Fox is happy to be back from Vegas. Now obviously 3.7-inch display makes it a little bit harder to type on, and one of the things that's a huge pet peeve for me on the Windows Phone platform is you can see here all this dead space between the signal strength indicator and then the actual keyboard itself. You would think they would want to extend the keyboard out, maybe get rid of these side buttons and have them where you can access maybe by swiping a certain way, but ideally I'd like to see as much keyboard space as possible. So I really think there's a lot of wasted keyboard space when you turn either of these devices into landscape mode. But aside of that, take a look at the transition effects and how smooth they are on both of these devices. So we'll come over to the Radar 4G and say, something similar. The Quick Brown Fox. Quick Brown Fox is a happy camper. And then let's say, you're over here and you're like, I didn't mean to say brown, I meant to say something else. You can click on the word and easily change it within the text. So you can easily go back and forth without having to go back and delete and, re-add. You can easily pop it up, and it brings up a list of assumed words. I can come back and forth through here and type in, that, for example. So they quack grown cause is a happy damper. And you can see, again, transition effects, nice and smooth over here. Now, at least in terms of keyboard and keyboard alone, I have to give it to the Radar 4G because it has a slightly larger display, and also I find the keyboard just to be ever so slightly more responsive on the Radar 4G. Not enough to really, nick the Lumia 710 by any means, but if keyboarding is your thing, if you type, 5 or 10,000 text messages a month or send and receive a lot of emails, the keyboard is slightly better on the Radar 4G. Now, let's take a look at web browsing on both of these devices, and you don't get flash support in either one of these, but you get a really nice smooth browsing experience. So phonedog.com loading up over here on the Lumia, and then let's see over here, looks like it's loading up as well, but we're going to go to the main page, phonedog.com. and we'll wait for that to load up as well. Again, HSPA Plus, these support speeds up to 14.4 megabits per second. You're never going to see that speed. That's a theoretical peak, but like I said, I've seen download speeds between 3 and 5 megabits per second on both of these devices. Now, PhoneDog is loading up over here. Excuse me. And you can see pinch to zoom, very responsive on both of these devices. And again, transition effects just absolutely smooth. You notice the browser bars move to the bottom of the display in Mango. But again, transition effects just incredibly smooth. So even though you're lacking HTML5 and Flash capabilities on these devices, just the smoothness more than makes up for it, in my opinion, unless you just absolutely need Flash. Pinch to zoom, incredibly responsive on these devices, excellent web browsing machines, and then of course if you want to go to a different tab, you can click on tabs and scroll right over to a new tab and then go right back to PhoneDog when you're done. So you can see those three little dots always bring up, it's kind of a right click of sorts. It brings up your additional menu, or if you're in an area where there's some things down here at the bottom and you're like, what does the X mean? What does that little folder mean? Well, you can press that and it brings up the subtext below those buttons to let you know what it is. Same thing over here, very responsive with little to no lag. Transition effects fantastic over here on the Radar 4G as well. So it's proof that, even though you have a device that's between, let's say, $50 and $100 on a 2-year contract, or free in some cases, depending on which retailer you're looking at, you can get a quality device with reasonable specifications, and more importantly, a device that performs really, really well. So pinch to zoom on these, got to give it a tie. Despite the faster processor in the Lumia 710, they're both pretty stock when it comes to speeds.